and welcome back to another episode of Exos Heroes, and this is part 2 of the equipment guide that we're putting out. And in this episode, we'll specifically talk about fated equipment and how you should be using them and where can you get them. For any of you who are watching this episode right now, if you do find this episode informative and helpful, please do consider like and subscribe. It will really help our channel grow. But with that being said, let's take a look at fated equipment. So fated equipment, apart from weapons, differ from other equipment in that they come with a random guardian stone. And I made that sound like, it's just another guardian stone. This is probably by far the most important mechanism in the game. So think about this, with 5 pieces of fated equipment, your hero will have up to 6 guardian stones in total. This will completely change the dynamic of your hero, make them very hard to break, and also these guardian stones come with very powerful set effects once you have 2 or 3 of them together, and those effects are game-changingly beneficial to your heroes. At the same time, it's important to note that fated weapons do not have guardian stones, and they are essentially upgraded version of legendary weapons. They're still good, but considering the fact that they don't have guardian stones make them much less worth talking about. Therefore, in this episode, we'll not be focusing too much on fated weapons. But just to give you guys a general idea, fated weapon can be obtained at the Airship Forge for 2000 relics of Dragon Dynasty, so those are the drops at the Holy Dragon Grounds. Or you can go to Door of Creation and use 50 relics for a chance of getting a fated weapon. And I think the chance is 3%, which is similar to the chance of getting a fated hero from the recruit. So with that being said, let's shift our focus back on fated equipment other than weapons. So apart from any special event, the only place that you can get fated equipment currently is through Airship Forge or at the Door of Creation. At the Airship Forge, it allows you to get 1 fated equipment per month for 200 stars of fate, which drops from special dungeons or events. Or you can also use 700 Exos to forge 10 equipment, which has a 3% chance of dropping a fated equipment, so very similar to the hero recruiting mechanism. At the Door of Creation, on the other hand, it allows you to trade 5 stars of fate for a chance of a fated equipment. And the chance, I believe, is also 3% at the moment. You also receive 1 fate mileage per chance, and when you get to 8 mileage points, you can get a guaranteed fated equipment. So now, as we talked about, there are 2 ways. One is kind of the Airship Forge route, the other is the Door of Creation. Which one's better? So we did a quick calculation here. So if you look at Airship Forge, for 200 stars, you can get 2 fated equipment. In other words, for 400 stars, you can get 2 fated equipment. But on the other hand, at the Door of Creation, for 400 stars, which equates to 80 tries because each try costs 5 stars, you are guaranteed 1 fated equipment through the mileage points, right? You get 80 mileage, you get 1 guaranteed fated equipment. But on the other hand, each try has a 3% chance of giving you a fated equipment. Means that in 80 tries, typically you would land in around 2.4 fated equipment. So if you add that together, at the Door of Creation for 400 stars, on average you should be getting actually 3.4 fated equipment, which is considerably higher than the 2 equipment that you're getting from the Airship Forge. So we're highly recommending to save up your stars and use them at the Door of Creation rather than wasting them on the Airship Forge. And now, with that being said, let's take a look at the Guardian Stones. So, as we mentioned earlier, each fated equipment comes with a unique Guardian Stone, and it's completely random, and you have the opportunity to change them if you do wish at the Door of Creation, but it's relatively costly. And let's talk a little bit more about these Guardian Stones and why they're so important. Because not only do they make it harder for your opponents to break your heroes, but most importantly, they come with effects if you pair them together. So let's take a look here. For the Flame Guardian Stones, right, the Flame set, if you have 2 or 4 or 6 Flame Stones, then you get the benefit of decreasing the final damage taken to your champion, and this is very powerful, right? So if you have a pair, you get a 5% decrease to damage taken. If you have 4 of them instead, you get a 10% damage decrease. And if you have 6, then you get a 20% damage reduction, which is quite a bit. So it's very useful for heroes that already have very good base tankiness or innate sustain, as well as heroes that generally can taunt the other team because they do get attacked a lot and they can benefit from repetitively reducing the damage taken. Most defense heroes can utilize this to good effect. So for example, Shufraken is one that comes to mind. He's very tanky and also has self-sustain, so if he can take less damage, he can essentially become a very, very unkillable target. But we would like to also point out that the effect is weaker than block or dodge, right? If you have higher dodge chance, you can essentially mitigate 100% of the damage. And also, if you do block an attack, the amount of damage that you can block is much higher. But what this brings is consistency. So heroes that are already tanky, that doesn't really require a significant amount of damage reduction, but rather want to have something that's consistent, the flame set is the way to go. On the other hand, however, if you put in the flame set on a hero that has relatively weak HP and defense, not very tanky, then they don't really benefit from it too much. I've seen a lot of glass cannon type of heroes that just gets burst down either way, because if you think about it, a 5% decrease or 10% decrease, unless you're significantly tankier than the damage you're about to take, it doesn't really make too big of a difference. So make sure you put the flame set on a hero that has innate tankiness that can really utilize the damage reduction. On the other hand, Frost and Nature set are great for heroes that are not very tanky but want to survive, so these are the best set that you can use for your DPS. So the Frost set, what it does is it increases block by 156 if you have 3 Frost stones, and if you have 6, it increases all the way to 390. So this is very useful for heroes who want to survive but are not very tanky, so by having higher block, they can block a lot more damage. But unlike Flame set, it's not very consistent because there's a chance you might not block it, and when that does happen, you have no damage mitigation whatsoever. So it's really a trade-off between, do I want to have higher damage mitigation or do I want something that's more consistent? And for a hero that's not very tanky to begin with, a consistent but weak damage mitigation effect is not really going to help them. So it makes a lot more sense to actually gamble on higher damage mitigation, hoping that your hero might survive so that he or she can then, on the next turn, deal out the damage that they were supposed to deal out. Similarly, the Nature set increases your dodge by 8 if you have 3 Nature Stones, and it increases your dodge by 20 if you have 6. And this is also very useful, and in some cases might even be better than Frost set for your high DPS, because when you are able to dodge, you are able to completely mitigate the entire incoming damage, and that's very powerful. But obviously, similar to the Frost set, the chance and RNG is always going to play a role in this set effect. It's not going to be very consistent, and even if you have it, there's still a chance that your DPS might be bursted down right away. But if they don't, then on the other hand, you're able to mitigate the entire incoming damage, and then your hero will be at a very healthy state to deal out its damage and do whatever he has to do. So very good for kind of a high DPS type of heroes. As we've listed out here, Bathory or Kirina are all good candidates for you to have the Nature set. Next up is the Machine set. So Machine set is very interesting. I don't believe the tooltip is correct. From what I've seen and my personal experience, Machine set actually brings the debuff immunity. So if you have 3, you are immune to 1 debuff, and it goes up to 2 if you have a full set. And what this is great is, it's very good for healers or any of your heroes that have the debuff removal ability. And this is very, very crucial in a lot of places, especially in places like the Upir Labyrinth or the Holy Dragon Ground, because some of the debuff effects can cripple your entire team, and it's very important to keep them off of your team. But obviously, for everyone on your team to have the machine set, it's not a very realistic scenario. However, if you do, you can put them on your healer or your debuff remover. And what that allows them to do is they can be immune to debuffs so that they can always use their skills to then cleanse everything off of your team. In that way, they can keep your team healthy, they can keep your team moving. So consider putting them on heroes such as Kaya, such as Anastasia. They're very, very useful. Especially Kaya with the machine set in the Holy Dragon Ground is very, very useful and certainly will be something that's going to benefit your team significantly going forward. And then next, let's take a look at the light set. So the light set creates a barrier on your hero's turn for 3 turns. So this gets refreshed each time your hero moves. And with 3 light stones, you get a barrier of 768. With 6, you get a barrier of 1920. This is a very powerful set, and it functions similar to the flame set. It's very great at making heroes who are innately tanky even more unkillable. However, it's worth pointing out that the maximum shield amount is capped. So unlike the flame set where there's the potential for you to mitigate a lot more damage, the light set is capped, so you're always to either get a shield of 768 or a shield that's worth 1920. So there is a little bit of trade-off there. But at the same time, it's also important to know that this shield does not stack with other shields. So imagine if you have a hero like Chatty who casts a shield for your entire backline, and one of your backline hero also has the light set. You will only get whichever is the highest amount, so they don't stack, and that can be a waste if you do have a lot of heroes that already have the shielding ability. So just keep that in mind, but overall, a very useful set, especially in the areas like Holy Dragon Grounds where the dragon does a lot of AoE damage. Having this can help you mitigate a lot of damage. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about the Darkness set. So how does the Darkness set work? Well, again, I don't think the tooltip is accurate here. So the tooltip does say that you heal based on the damage taken, but I believe it's heal based on damage dealt. So it's essentially lifesteal. And with 4 Darkness Stones, you get a 12% lifesteal, and with 6, you get a 30% lifesteal. And in my opinion, this is currently probably the weakest set. Ideally, this would be a great set to put on heroes who has very high damage output, right? Like your Rachels or Zeons who can do a lot of damage and constantly healing up. However, on the other hand, those are also heroes that are likely to be bursted down easily and are likely to be the focused target of your opponent's team. So what that means is, unless you have some upfront damage mitigation that's offered by things like the light set with its barrier, or the flame set with its damage reduction, or the frost or nature set that gives you dodge or block, you're not going to survive the initial attack. So if you don't survive the initial attack, you never get a chance to actually deal the damage and lifesteal off of that. So that's the biggest issue. It doesn't seem to work very well, because the fact that a lot of these high damage champions can be bursted down so easily, you'd rather have the upfront damage mitigation than the ability to lifesteal. Another thing about the Darkness set is CC can be very detrimental to it as well. If you cannot use your skills, or if you don't have enough mana to cast your high damage skills, it also limits how much lifesteal you can get. So that's another thing that really limits the benefit of your lifesteal. So who do we think the Darkness set can be useful on? There are a couple of heroes that might be able to benefit from it. I think Zhakang really comes to mind, because he is technically a very tanky hero, but if you do pair him with Rachel, then there's the opportunity where he can crit on every single attack and start to do a decent amount of damage. So essentially he becomes this type of tanky bruiser that can lifesteal when he attacks, but it's hard to kill because his base defense and base HP is pretty high. So Zhakang can be a candidate for the Darkness set. On the other hand, I think Rodley can also benefit from it, especially when he's paired with Garv and he gets the shield. So similar to Zhakang in a way that, Rodley has very high damage output, but at the same time, through his own shields, he becomes pretty tanky as well. So he's not going to be very easy to kill. In those cases, yes, I think the Darkness set can be useful, but at the same time, compared to the benefit that the other sets offer, it just doesn't seem to be that good, and it seems to be so conditional in so many cases that I would stay away from the Darkness set for now. But with that being said, that's pretty much all we have on the Fated Equipment and the Guardian Stone set effects. So let us know if you guys have any questions. Also let us know if you guys need help with anything else that's in the game. We're more than happy to look into them for you and help the community out. But with that being said, if you do find this episode informative and helpful, please leave a like and subscribe. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.